Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large, another great segment here, and some Smart Talk Radio, of course, is in your future. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck, and very pleased to have back on with us again Harlow Unger, one of the most prolific writers and historians in the country, in particular about American history. He has been on this program many, many times with fascinating works about Washington and Adams and on and on and on. A brand new work called Henry Clay, America's Greatest Statesman. Pleased to talk about Henry Clay and pleased to talk to Harlow Unger. How are you, my friend?
Just fine, thank you. Thank you for inviting me back to your show. I always enjoy it.
You bet. Well, we are... Henry Clay doesn't come up at cocktail parties often. And
well, some people with feet of clay do, but not Henry Clay.
Yes.
He did not have feet of clay. He was, as I say in my book, America's Greatest Statesman. He was really the father of the Congress as we know it. George Washington, of course, set up the presidency. It took quite a few years, almost more than 20 years, for Henry Clay to arrive in the House of Representatives and organize it into the important body that was envisioned by the framers when they wrote the Constitution. When Henry Clay arrived, these congressmen from all over the country, remember they were frontiersmen, farmers from the wilderness, they were absolutely at each other's throats, fighting with each other. A fellow named Derringer in Philadelphia had invented this small pocket-sized gun, and everyone had one in Congress. They went outside and shot each other. They fought on the floor, literally, fistfights on the floor of Congress. Some congressmen came with their dogs, and it was a mess. Henry Clay brought it to order and turned it into the body that the founders had envisioned. That is the second most important branch of the federal government after the presidency. Only the president and the Speaker of the House in all of the federal government, only those two people are elected by all of the people of the United States. They represent the entire nation. Now, of course, the Speaker is elected by the members of Congress, all of whom come from all over the country. But they elect the Speaker, and once he becomes Speaker, he can no longer vote. He can no longer participate in debates. He is there to organize the House and bring this huge, diversified body into line to support measures that are in the interests of the entire United States. Now, that's a pretty difficult job. Obviously, we have this is a big country with millions of people, and to bring the interests of different areas of the country are not the same. The interests of people in Nevada are not the same as the interests of the people in Vermont. There's a lot less water in Nevada to begin with, but they go there to protect the interests and further the interests of their neighborhoods, their constituents, and that's what they're supposed to do. But that means there are going to be huge differences, and there's going to be huge disagreements. Now, the net result is that in the 225 years of the House of Representatives, they have only passed 5% of all the laws that are presented. Only 5%. Now, a lot of people today, and they obviously don't understand American history and don't appreciate democracy, but a lot of people say that's dysfunctional. Well, it's only dysfunctional when Congress doesn't do what I want it to do. When it does what I want it to do, then it's functional. And that's not democracy. Democracy is where all of our interests, conflicting interests, are examined, and in the case of the House of Representatives, the Speaker brings together, tries to find common ground and act on the basis of the greater interest of the United States of America. And now that doesn't satisfy everybody. It never can. When a law is finally passed in Congress, it represents a compromise. Some people get a little of what they want, but not all. And some people get none of what they want. And that's not dysfunction, folks. That's democracy. Alexander Hamilton said, if you want a government that'll do exactly what you want quickly and efficiently, get yourself a dictator. Otherwise, embrace the system we have, which we call democracy. Now, Henry Clay set up this system in Congress and became the greatest speaker, the greatest statesman in American history. In fact, in his day, they called him the Great Compromiser. He came up with many compromises, but 5 in particular that saved the nation, that kept a divided Congress together in the one building and their states together as one nation over 50 years, postponing civil war until the country had grown stable enough to survive a civil war. In 1820, they wouldn't have survived a civil war, and indeed, the country was about to break up. The Congress was divided between the slave states of the South and the free states of the North, and was about to divide up, and no one would have gone to war over the division. They would have set a pox on all your houses, and the nation would have divided up into 2, maybe 3 little nations, and the world powers would have moved in and seized one or all of these nations. France, Spain, and Britain all had ambitions to take over all of North America, which they had once ruled before we declared independence. The American Revolution, the story of the American Revolution would have gone under the dustbin of history. There never would have been in the United States. Henry Clay saved the nation with these compromises that held us all together while he instituted a huge economic and social scheme that linked every corner of the nation with a transportation network, a network of roads, canals, and later railroads. He called it the American system. And until then, no one could travel in this country. You had to go on horseback. The average American in 1820, if you asked him the name of his country, he'd say Virginia, Massachusetts, New York. He wouldn't have said the United States of America. After Henry Clay got his American system to link all of 20 states stretching from California to Maine, Americans could travel where they wanted to, back and forth across state lines. Farmers could ship their goods out of state. They developed sources of supply from out of state. Banks set up branches in each state. We were linked. Relatives would travel to see each other. They weren't about to see this ended in a breakup of the nation. Now, Americans, at least in the 20 states of the North and Central and Midwestern section of the country, now, by 1850, they call themselves Americans. And that was because of Henry Clay, who saved the nation, held it together long enough for us to survive our Civil War.
Yeah. Again, if you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. An interesting conversation about Henry Clay, brand new work by Harlow, Unger, a very prolific American historian. He has been on this show many times. Very pleased to have him on again. Henry Clay, America's greatest statesman. Mr. Unger, interesting relationship between Abraham Lincoln and Henry Clay. There's an interesting quote that says, "The man for whom I fought all my humble life." He was close with the Clay family, was he not, through his wife?
Yes, indeed. He called Clay his teacher, his mentor, and indeed, Henry Clay was. Abraham Lincoln married Mary Todd, whose family lived almost next door to the Clays, were very close friends of the Clays, and Mary Todd grew up knowing Henry Clay very, very well. He was like a grandfather to her, and when Abraham Lincoln came a-wooing, he met Henry Clay, absolutely embraced his values, and became his student. And when Lincoln went into Congress, he learned the art of compromise and embraced it that Henry Clay had established in Congress. So as Lincoln wooed and then married Mary Todd, Clay became the young Lincoln's friend and mentor. And when Clay died, of course, a few years before the Civil War began, and when he died, Lincoln gave the principal eulogy for Henry Clay, one of the most moving speeches Lincoln ever made. And as he began, he looked to heaven and cocked his ear and said, "I recognize Clay's voice, speaking as it ever spoke for the Union, for the Constitution, for the freedom of man." And when Lincoln sent Union forces to war, he explained it in Henry Clay's words, basically, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union." And then Lincoln went on to say, and most Americans don't realize this, Lincoln said, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union. It is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery, I do because I believe it helps to save this Union. And what I don't do, what I forbear because I do not believe it would help to save the Union." Abraham Lincoln was basically quoting Henry Clay. And Henry Clay, like all the great statesmen in American history, worshipped the Union, held it together, and brought Americans together. The tragedy of the last few years, and he's now resigned, is we've had a speaker who has divided us, and we have small groups in Congress that are dividing us and don't believe in compromise and the basic principles of democracy. We all have different interests. In any family, we have different interests. Mothers and fathers don't always see eye to eye, and certainly their children don't. But the art of compromise is what holds that family together. The art of compromise is what has held this nation together. And Henry Clay was the greatest practitioner of compromise. He developed it into an art form that all great speakers have followed until quite recently.
We have had lots of very, very proactive, extraordinary people hold office and serve in the public good in the course of American history. But he was the only freshman congressman to ever be elected as Speaker of the House. He ran for the presidency, 4 or 5 times. An incredible body of work and public service. Share with us, if you would, a little bit about his early sort of formative years. What made him so driven, and what ignited this passion, do you think?
Well, he was born in Virginia, which at that time was America's richest, largest, and most heavily populated state. Richmond was almost the capital of our country. It was much more important than New York, for example, or Boston. The great framers came from Virginia, and the 4 of the first 5 presidents all came from Virginia. It's no coincidence. So he was born there on a farm, on a tobacco farm. Most tobacco farms, tobacco is a wonderful profitable crop, but it depletes the soil very, very quickly. In 4 or 5 years, tobacco has used up all the soil. And in the meantime, after Henry Clay was born, his father died when he was only 4. His mother remarried, and the stepfather saw the farm value of the farm depleting and moved to Kentucky, and didn't take his oldest stepson Henry with him. He felt the boy was very, very thin and tubercular, and probably couldn't withstand the voyage. So he sent him into Richmond, where he went to work in a department store as a clerk, and a few years later got a similar job as a clerk in the courthouse, where George White was chief judge. George White was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence and the senior judge in Richmond. and he was developing Parkinson's disease. His hands were trembling. He couldn't write. And he noticed young Henry Clay's handwriting was absolutely beautiful, and he took him on as his amanuensis, someone who writes all the documents for you and takes dictation. He was a widower. George White was. He had no children, getting lonely in his old age, and took to Henry Clay and, in a sense, adopted him. Took him on basically as a godson, taught him the law, and helped him pass his bar exams. And Henry Clay was ready to start practicing law, but George White advised him, don't stay here in Richmond. This is the capital of all the lawyers in the country. The great lawyers are here. You'll have a tough time breaking in. Go up to Kentucky. Kentucky had become a state. It had been part of Virginia. It became a state. Thousands of people were pouring in to claim lands, and they all needed lawyers. So Henry Clay went up to Lexington and set up practice, did very well, but then met the daughter of the chief banker in town, the founder of the first bank in Lexington, a very wealthy family. He married her, and that made his career there in Lexington. He became the most important lawyer, the richest lawyer, invested in lands himself through his father-in-law, and became a wealthy man, a very well-connected man.
Yeah.
And then won, and he was a brilliant speaker, a very personable guy. He played cards, he drank with the boys, and before you know it, he was elected to the state legislature and then sent on to Washington as the state's representative in the House.
As was the case in many of the early American, we'll call it aristocracy, he opposed slavery, but had slaves himself. I'm always curious as to how they sort of not lived with necessarily that dichotomy, but it was just sort of, I would say, kind of just part of the times, was it not?
Well, as today, we have, and they had two sets of laws. You had federal laws and state laws. And the federal government had nothing to do with slavery. Slavery was under state control, and Virginia, when Kentucky was part of Virginia, when Kentucky became an independent state, it sanctioned slavery. Slavery was the law of the land in Kentucky, and a slave owner did not have the right to emancipate his slaves. That was against the law. And unless the law was changed, Henry Clay could do nothing about it, other than be as kind as he could be, and he was, and try to treat his slaves with all the respect that he would any hired hand. And that's all he could do. He had no power to change that. When he campaigned on a federal level, he was against slavery. He was for abolition, and indeed helped found the American Colonization Society, which planned over the years to gradually emancipate the slaves and send them back to their countries of origin. So he had, like all federal officials, he could only act. He had to act on two different levels. One was the federal level, where he could advocate abolition, and the other was on the state level, where he really had no influence at all.
We've talked before with you on this show about how George Washington truly defined the presidency, and I'm wondering if you don't feel the same way about Henry Clay defining the role, at least for quite a while anyway, of the Speaker of the House and its ability to influence. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. He influenced it right to this day. The influence of Henry Clay is the most important founding influence, other than George Washington's influence on the presidency. Henry Clay made the Speaker of the House the second most powerful man in America. The president is in charge of the executive branch. He has to execute the laws, enforce them. The Speaker of the House is in charge of the legislative branch. He controls who is appointed chairman and chairwomen of the of the various committees. He controls the membership of each committee. He controls which laws get through the committee, which laws can come to the floor, who can speak for and who can speak against the laws, and whether or not the law can come to the floor at all for consideration. So he is in charge of the legislative branch, and the great speakers have all modeled themselves after Henry Clay and somehow gotten at least 5% of the laws down to the floor and enacted into law. John Boehner is one of the first absolute failures as a Speaker of the House. The Cleveland Plain Dealer, which is the largest newspaper in Ohio, Boehner's home state, had a stupid editorial a few months ago calling Boehner, and this is from the newspaper, quote, that Boehner had perfected the art of disagreeing without being disagreeable. Well, that's not what the Speaker is supposed to be or to do. The Speaker is supposed to perfect the art of compromise, not disagreeing. He's supposed to perfect the art of compromise and bring Congress, the House, together as much as possible to pass laws. As I say, they've only passed 5% of the laws in history, but these have been important laws, and usually with great speakers modeling themselves after Henry Clay. Henry Clay really formed the rules of Congress that are in effect today, and he set the standard. He was the greatest speaker in American history, and he set the standard for all speakers to come afterwards. Unfortunately, we've obviously had a few that that refused to follow that role, and the net result was a divided Congress that even shut down the government at times. Again, that's not the role of government. Now, Congress yesterday passed an interim bill to allow the government to keep functioning until December 11th. But that's not the role of Congress. Is to keep government running. Congress is government, and they never in history have they allowed little blocks, little minority blocks, as we now have. We have a block of 20 extremists who want to shut down the government if they don't get their way. That is not democracy, folks. That's Nazism, communism, it's totalitarianism. Democracy is compromise, and Henry Clay set the standard. He was the master of compromise. He united Americans, as have all the great statesmen in our history, the Washingtons and Lincolns and Roosevelts and Eisenhowers. They have united us as a people, sometimes through very dark times, and Henry Clay united us as a people. That's what made him America's greatest statesman.
Well, I'm curious. I can imagine if he were suddenly dropped into Congress today, he'd either go right to work or throw up his hands and walk out. But
no, he wouldn't throw up his hands. He would collar these people and explain to them what this country's about. I mean, this block of 20 people, I don't know their names, but they don't understand democracy, and they don't like democracy. They don't want to function in a democracy. They belong in some other country. They're not Americans. He would appeal to each member's patriotism and loyalty to this country, because basically what this block of 20 extremists in Congress, that's treason what they're doing. They're trying to tear down our government. And Henry Clay would not permit it. There was one when he was very young in Congress, just beginning as Speaker, and getting control of the Congress. One elderly congressman was talking well beyond his allotted time, and suddenly Henry Clay's gavel came down like thunder on the sound block, and he to stop this man from talking, and the old man protested. He said, "But I speak to posterity." And Henry Clay said, "Yes, sir, but you seem determined to keep speaking until the arrival of your audience, and I will not allow it." That was the end.
Well, again, if you just joined us, we're talking to Harlow Unger, one of America's most prolific historians, writers, speakers. He's been on this show many, many times. We're talking about a brand new work called Henry Clay, America's Greatest Statesman. Mr. Unger, as we start to wind down here, we kind of said at the top of the show, you don't talk about Henry Clay much at cocktail parties.
I do.
Why? Yeah, you probably do. Why do we not necessarily know more about him? And again, we recognize part of our audience does know who Henry Clay is. We all sort of know who he is, but it does not seem like when you think, if someone said name the top 5 most influential people throughout American political history, maybe his name comes up, but maybe not. Why is that? Why do we overlook him?
Primarily because there is no ceremony and no real great press coverage and today television coverage when the Speaker signs a bill. It goes to the White House, and there's a big ceremony, and the President always tries to claim credit for every bill that passes, but he doesn't deserve the credit. The credit belongs to the Speaker, so that the Speaker doesn't get the attention of the press and the public when a bill is passed. Very few people can tell you who was responsible in the House or Senate for any given law. But when the President signs it, it becomes his law. The Civil Rights Act, the Anti-Poverty Program, we associate those with different presidents, not with the Speaker of the House who did all the dirty work, pulling dissident people together and getting them to agree on final legislation. So that's the basic reason. And remember, the Speaker, like every other member of the House, comes from a tiny little district somewhere. Henry Clay came from Lexington, Kentucky. John Boehner came from the sticks outside Cincinnati, Ohio, a rural and somewhat suburban area. So that other people don't get to know these members of the House. Only the members of the House are known by the voters in their districts, and that's about it. Even when they become Speaker, they are not allowed to debate, so you don't hear their voices supporting or opposing legislation, even though they have done so indirectly in allowing that bill to come to the floor for a vote. So their voices just aren't heard. When the President speaks, his voice is heard everywhere.
Well, it has been another fascinating conversation with Harlow Unger, again, one of America's most prolific and well-respected authors, authorities, maybe statesman himself, but the brand new work called Henry Clay, America's Greatest Statesman. I think we know this, but share with us, if you would, where people can pick up a copy of the book and also find out more about the work that you've done in the past.
Well, you can go online to any book dealer like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or order the book through your local bookstore if they don't have it on the shelves. And you can look up all my books on my website, harlowunger.com.
Well, it certainly begs the question. It seems like you're cranking one of these a month almost, but they're all high-quality stuff. What do you have your sights on next?
The next founding father that I'll be writing about is Benjamin Rush, M.D., the only doctor to sign the Declaration of Independence, the father of modern American medicine, the father of the medical corps in the Army, the father of so many branches of healthcare in this country. He was really a pioneer, and he was a doctor to so many of the founding fathers themselves. He treated Jefferson, Adams, and a whole bunch of them. And he was quite a revolutionary. He spoke out for independence, went to the battlefield originally to fight, and found so many people wounded and bleeding. He was already an MD. He started treating them on the battlefield, and they didn't treat soldiers on the battlefield in those days. They let severely wounded ones, they let them die. Benjamin Rush was not going to allow that.
Well, we look forward to that, and again, have a great rest of the year, and look forward to talking to you again soon in the future.
Thanks so much for inviting me on your show.
You bet. We will be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.